ਚੱਕਦੇ ਟੀਵੀ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਰਮਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਸਾਡੇ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਪੱਖ ਦੀਆਂ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਨੇ ਵਾਂਡਾ ਮੌਰਿਸ ਜੀ, ਜੋ ਕਿ CEO ਨੇ ਡਾਈਂਗ ਵਿਦ ਡਿਗਨਿਟੀ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਗਰੁੱਪ ਦੇ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਕੀ ਇਹ ਗਰੁੱਪ ਕਰਦਾ, ਕੀ ਇਹਦੀ ਖਾਸੀਅਤ ਆ, ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਪੱਕਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ, ਤਿੰਨ ਮੈਂਬਰਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੈਨਲ ਹੈਗਾ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਫਿਜ਼ੀਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਅਸਿਸਟਡ ਡਾਈਂਗ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੁਪਰੀਮ ਕੋਰਟ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਰੂਲਿੰਗ ਆਈ ਸੀਗੀ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ 1 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਇੱਕ ਖਰੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਇਸ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਸੀਗਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਪਾਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਣੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ। ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ, ਇਹ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਹੈ ਕੀ। ਸੋ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੇ ਆਓ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇਸ ਨਵੇਂ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ। So Wanda Morris would like to welcome to our studio, and thanks for joining us today.
Really a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
We have been listening about this from I think February of this year that Supreme Court had passed a ruling to direct Canadian government to get a rule for physician-assisted dying. So first we would like to know about what is physician-assisted dying.
So a physician-assisted dying, as determined by the Supreme Court, means the right of a competent adult with a grievous and irremediable medical condition to have the assistance of a doctor to die, and that doctor can provide that assistance either by prescribing life-ending medication or by administering life-ending medication. And also just a couple more points. Only the person themselves who's sick and dying can ask for the assistance, and to be eligible, the person also has to be suffering intolerably.
Okay, so what was the ruling? What was the exact ruling by the Supreme Court of Canada?
So right now in the criminal code, it's illegal to assist someone to die, and it's illegal to consent to your own death. So the Supreme Court of Canada said that in a year's time, they would strike down those bans in the limited instances where the assistance for someone to end their life was done by a physician under those terms that we just mentioned. So if there's a competent adult who freely and voluntarily requests assisted dying, and they have a grievous and irremediable medical condition that's causing them intolerable suffering.
Okay, so what is the latest issue we have? We heard that there's a 3-member panel set up to discuss all the rulings for this matter. Mm-hmm. So what is the issue with that panel?
So the Supreme Court gave Canadians a number of options and gave our governments and regulators a number of options. They said that the federal government could legislate, the provinces and territories could legislate, both levels of government could, neither had to. So for about 5 months, nothing happened, and then the federal government appointed a panel to look into the issue of assisted dying, which initially seemed like it was going to be a good idea. But what happened is that the 3-person panel that they appointed, 2 of the members on the panel had given a testimony in the Supreme Court case against legalizing assisted dying. And so those 2 people were then tasked with creating recommendations for how to implement assisted dying. And Dying with Dignity, we thought that gave them a serious credibility issue. We tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, but then some months after they were appointed, they issued a document to get input from the Canadian public, and that document contained numerous systemic issues. It was also not credible. So once the new Liberal government came in, we called on them to simply disband this panel.
Okay, so you talk about the Liberal government and you have also called to disband this panel. So what is the stance for the Liberal government right now? What information you guys have right now?
So when we were campaigning, we were able to get statements of support from 3 of the national parties. The Conservatives didn't respond. And the Liberals in their campaign statement said that the Supreme Court has spoken, that this is a charter right, that they are a party that respects the charter, order and the Supreme Court, so they would be implementing assisted dying. So we're very pleased with that response. What we have heard since then is, and it's not been confirmed, but we've heard some speculation that they may be asking for the Supreme Court to delay, to extend the time that they have to legislate if they so choose. The Supreme Court gave governments a year to legislate if they wanted, and there's been speculation published that the Liberals would ask for another 6 months.
So do you think that 6 months are required for this purpose?
I don't, because there's no requirement for the federal government to legislate. They can simply allow the ban to lapse so that physicians could allow someone, could assist someone to die. And the federal government's role in legislation, likely even if they did legislate, would be pretty limited. The issue of physician-assisted dying covers both health law and criminal law. We'd likely just need a small amendment to the criminal code, whereas the health law would need a much broader amendments. So for the federal government to deny people that right now are suffering terribly and waiting for release, for them to deny them a chance to have that assistance, just to make sure that they can put their mark on assisted dying, that to me that doesn't seem reasonable.
So, but the Supreme Court did give them 1 year. So with this 1 year, because we all know there was elections and maybe the Conservative didn't work that much on this particular topic. So if Liberal government asked for 6 months, I think that is a genuine case. Maybe they do require some more research on this particular topic, and also they can also find more people coming in and giving their views on this particular matter.
So just to be clear, we talked about how we called for the federal panel to be disbanded, but that's not the only group that's been doing work. There's a provincial and territorial expert advisory group that was created. That's been working really hard, and it's got the support of the provincial and territorial health ministers to create recommendations that can be followed by all the provinces and territories so that we do have a harmonized approach. They have been consulting. We've also had consultations from various provinces and other stakeholders. For example, over a year ago, the Canadian Medical Association did a cross-Canada consultation exercise. So there's been a lot of consultation, a lot of information. What we need now is a release for people that are suffering. So I'm not opposing the Liberals taking their time and being careful with this. I just think they should allow the ban to elapse and then legislate on their own time.
Okay. You mentioned that the Canadian Medical Association did research on this particular topic. And do you think that they will be needing more time to direct the doctors or the physicians in this particular case? Maybe they might not be ready for this, or they might need some more time to work on this?
No. First of all, we know that Quebec is, who has done their own provincial process, is ready to roll out assisted dying on December 10th. And the physicians in that province have received information and guidelines about how to implement it. So then we have another 2 months from then to February. The CMA has issued its final guidelines, and the individual provincial colleges, many of those have issued their own guidelines in draft. They're currently getting input prepared in preparation to doing their final guidelines. So I think that the physicians are prepared, and from the moment that February 6th was announced as the target date for a new regulatory framework, they've been working towards making sure that they are able to do so in the event that government doesn't choose to legislate. So I don't think that we need the extra time for the various physicians' colleges.
Okay, so if the current panel is disbanded, what would be your recommendation on this?
My recommendation would be for the federal government to reach out to the provincial and territorial expert advisory group. You know, whereas the federal panel just had the 3 members and 2 of them who opposed assisted dying, the provincial and territorial advisory group, expert advisory group, has represents 11 provinces and territories. It's got representation that's broad, a real depth and diversity of skills that are represented. So without seeing their recommendations, I can't endorse them, but I think it's a very solid process. They're prepared to give the federal government recommendations, and I would really encourage the federal government to meet with them and see how they can work with the provinces in a joint process.
And how about Dying with Dignity group is working along with this all this time?
So we've been working really hard. First of all, campaigning, bringing this as an election issue and getting support from 3 of the national parties. Now we're working to support not only the Liberals, but in the federal government, but the provincial governments. We've created what we call a regulatory principles for regulatory framework, so what we think should be in legislation. And we're also have just recently released a blueprint showing how the federal government can work with the provinces and make sure we're ready to go February 6th.
So all eyes would be on February 6th, and we will be looking at this also because this is one of the issues that have been discussed beginning of the last year. And this was really important during that particular tenure. I think a few of the Canadians that did wanted to get this help, the physician-assisted dying, they went to Switzerland. I think that's the only country where it's legal to get this kind of help.
Switzerland's the only country where it's legal for someone that's not a resident of the country to have assistance. There's actually 10 jurisdictions now. Quebec will be the 11th, but Switzerland's the only one where you don't actually have to be a citizen or resident to have assistance to die.
Well, thanks a lot for all this information, and we might be seeing you again, I think before around February 6th. So we'll get more updates on this from you. So there's another question that says, what would be Dying with Dignity like to see in this particular the ruling and the government would be passing?
So I think there's really 3 things that we think are essential to be incorporated into legislation. And the first is with the safeguards or the protections that we need in assisted dying. We have to balance the rights of 2 groups of vulnerable people. First of all, we have vulnerable people that we want to make sure don't get coerced into assisted dying, that don't have a death that they don't want. And then we have to balance that against the needs of those individuals who are sick and dying and desperate to get out of their pain and suffering. And we have to make sure that they have a path to assisted dying, that they're able to access it. So things like, making sure that there's not an unreasonable waiting period for someone who's looking for an assisted death, that that the person themselves can make the decision, and certainly would need to reiterate their decision, repeat it a number of times, but we don't think it's something that should take years or special panels or things like that. The other 2 are related. Certainly we support the rights of physicians who don't want to provide an assisted death. It's called the principle of conscientious objection, and any physician who doesn't want to prescribe or administer medication should have the option not to do so. But we have to balance that against the needs of the patients. The healthcare system fundamentally is about the rights of patients, so patients have to be able to get information about assisted dying from their doctors, even if they don't agree with it, and the doctor has to ensure that the patient can get the treatment they want. So while they don't have to provide it, they need to make sure they refer the patient to either another doctor or an agency who will make sure they get the support. And the third is a critical access issue as well, which is about the patient having access to assisted dying wherever they're living. So if someone is in a hospital or a hospice or has chosen to go to an assisted living facility, it's critical that they have access to assisted dying there, and that a particular hospital or hospice can't say, look, we have this worldview of religion and we're going to prohibit you from having assisted death, and If you have a doctor that tries to provide it, we're going to take away their privileges and their livelihood. So essentially what we want to see in legislation is fair and reasonable safeguards, access through physician referral and information, and access in hospitals and institutions, so no matter where Canadians are, they can have the support that the Supreme Court said was their essential human right.
So are there any upcoming events or campaigns going on right now for the support of physician-assisted dying?
Yes, there are. I really encourage your audience to check out our website, voiceyourchoice.ca, where we talk about our different campaigns. And in particular, on Wednesday, November the 4th, we have our National Day of Action, where the Canadians, the overwhelming majority of Canadians who support assisted dying, are invited to come out and show their support for compassionate and peaceful choice at end of life.
Thanks a lot. So ਅਸੀਂ ਕਾਫੀ ਇਸ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਐਂਡ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹੀ ਉਮੀਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਕਾਫੀ ਗੁੰਝਲਦਾਰ ਬਣਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਇੱਕ ਤੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੁਪਰੀਮ ਕੋਰਟ ਦੀ ਰੂਲਿੰਗ ਹੈਗੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਹੁਣ 6 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਹੋਰ ਮੰਗੇ ਜਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵਾਂਡਾ ਮੌਰਿਸ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ 6 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਹੋਣਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ ਔਰ ਜੇ ਇਹ 3 ਮੈਂਬਰਾਂ ਦਾ ਪੈਨਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਸਕ੍ਰੈਪ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਆ ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ 2 ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਵਿਰੋਧ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਇਸ ਪੈਨਲ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਸਕਾਰਡ ਕਰਕੇ ਨਵਾਂ ਪੈਨਲ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸਿਸ ਜਾਂ ਟੈਰੀਟਰੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਲਿਆ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਪਏ ਆ ਸੋ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਵੀ ਅਪਡੇਟ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਫਿਰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋਵਾਂਗੇ Wanda, once again, thanks a lot for joining us today and giving out all the information to our viewers.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.